Okay, good morning, everybody. My name's Councillor Kate Revilius. I'm Executive Member for Transport, and this is the Transport Decision Session on Tuesday, 21st of October, 2025. Welcome, everybody. I've had no apologies for absence, and there are no declarations of interest that I need to declare for any of the items on this report. I'm just going to sign the minutes from the last meeting. Thank you. And then we will move straight on to our public participation section. So we've got two public participants today. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak, and I'm happy to give you a 30-second reminder if you need it before the 3 minutes. So I'd like to welcome, first of all, and apologies if I mispronounce your name, Mrs. Watsala Kurupu Mudiansalaj. Would you like to come up to the microphone? Would you like me to give you a 30-second reminder, or are you happy to?
Yeah, I'm happy to finish it.
Okay, lovely. Go when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, all. My name is Vatsala Kurupu, and I'm a resident at Kitchener Street, York. Dear Council members, I'm here to express my support for the proposed R67 Residence Priority Parking Scheme. I believe it is a sensible decision to implement this parking scheme in our area. Kitchener Street and the surrounding areas are conveniently located near the city centre, York St. John University, York Hospital, schools, and several bus routes, including number 5, 5A, number 1, 1A, number 13, number 12, and number 6. However, this accessibility has made it easier for non-residents to park their cars and access these amenities, resulting in a significant reduction in parking spaces available to residents. Over the past 6 months, the issue of long-stay parking has escalated and become a pressing problem for residents in the area. I would like to share my experience regarding the parking situation in our area. At the end of the day, it can be quite frustrating when I come home and I cannot find a parking spot. There have been times when I've had to park far away and walk 300 yards to my house. I'm sure you can understand how inconvenient this can be. For instance, there was an occasion when my family and I spent 30 minutes driving around Huntington Road just to find a parking space, and unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. Many residents, including myself, are faced with the dilemma of either driving and risking the chance of not finding a parking or taking a taxi to avoid the frustration. This situation has been disturbing our peace of mind and negatively affecting our daily routines alongside our other commitments. Therefore, I have 2 suggestions to improve the parking situation. Number 1, it is essential to introduce permit parking in the proposed area. And number 2, it would be fair to allocate a few limited parking spaces for non-residents as well. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and thank you for listening. You all have a good day.
Thank you, and I will take all of that into account when we make the decision. Thank you for coming in. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Fenton to come and talk about the proposed changes to Res Park. Would you like a 30-second reminder? You're okay. Right, just go when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I welcome the review of the Res Park consultation and ballot arrangements. I know from experience in my own ward of the often tortuous nature of the process and how many residents put in a lot of time and effort, as do officers, which can end in frustration and disappointment. It's unfortunate that the proposed changes set out in the report, there hasn't been the opportunity for those to come to pre-decision scrutiny, which I think is a missed opportunity, but hopefully going forward, Res Park and broader parking issues, we can have some input from scrutiny. As you'll be aware, it's an issue on which lots of people have lots to say and input. But we are where we are, and so the priority now, I think, is to get some clarity around the direction of travel. Councillor Whitcroft's motion called for all residents within the City of York boundary to have equitable access to car parking and for there to be a detailed plan and timeline for expanding Res Park. These statements could be interpreted as meaning a citywide rollout of Res Park schemes. That's not what's being proposed in this report, but it would be helpful to know in due course what is envisaged. The report references the local transport strategy, but not the accompanying implementation plan, which commits to develop a consistent and equitable strategy for parking on and off street with an initial focus of a 2-kilometre radius from the city centre. Res Park will invariably have a role to play as part of this part of work, but it's not mentioned in the report. And again, it would be helpful to know what is envisaged in relation to this 2-kilometre commitment. If there are plans to expand Res Park into this 2-kilometre zone, there really needs to be discussions happening sooner rather than later on where and how. Many residents in areas of my ward within this zone would welcome a conversation about this, and many would actually be supportive of an expanded Res Park scheme for a variety of reasons. Finally, there's an admission in the report that the proposals could result in fewer opportunities for public participation. The report does go on to say that one option would be to focus the informal stage on the principles of Res Park and the desired outcomes, which may differ from area to area depending on the demands of parking. I welcome this approach as a way to ensure that residents' voices can still be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that input, and I will try and give you some answers to those questions. Thank you. Okay, so that's all of our public speakers for today. So I'm going to move on to the agenda items, and for each item we have a number of officers with us and one officer online, I believe. So I'll ask the officers to introduce themselves as they introduce the item. So the first item we're going to go to is item 5 on the agenda, which is the Lendal Bridge major refurbishment project. So Dave, are you introducing it first? Yeah.
Yeah, morning Chair, morning everybody. I'm supported today. I'm Dave Atkinson, I'm the Director of Environmental and Regulatory Services. I'm supported today online by Siavosh Makhmudchai, who I think is available online. We'll call Sia in if there are any technical issues that need comment on. This paper is to bring to yourself some much needed major maintenance piece of work on Lendal Bridge. Lendal Bridge is a critical part of the York transport network, as well as being a very recognisable city asset and a Grade 2 star listed building. Grade 2, sorry, listed building. We've had an investment pot of 1.9 million in the Highways Capital Programme to do the essential maintenance works, and we've been looking for a point in the schedule where we can start and do those works. So in the report, we're recommending we're going through procurement to start work in April 2026, and it'll be an 8-week piece of work. But additionally, there's some sort of not just cosmetic, but some paint work which will extend the life of the repairs on the bridge and give a bit more longevity to Lendal Bridge before we need to go back in again. So there's two phases of work proposed. The first piece of work proposed being the essential maintenance. The second piece is around some paint work on the bridge. The first piece of work will mean full closure of the bridge, the carriageways on the bridge for 8 weeks. The footways will still be available, so they'll still be available for walkers and wheelers, and we're working on a plan which we're likely to do the contract around how we would enable cyclists moving across Lendal Bridge. When we get to that, when we get to that eight-week piece of work, the extended works will take around 38 weeks. But that'll largely be, well, it'll be off carriageway and largely not impact the footways. So the biggest impacts will be either one footway or the other. But we'll manage so everybody will be able to access and cross. The ask of yourself today is to delegate authority to myself in consultation with the Director of Governance and Head of Procurement to effectively sign the contracts with the contractor who will firstly do the essential piece of work, but also approve us moving to exec to get approval for the funding for the phase 2 work, which we will look to manage from within the budgets in Transport and Highways capital programmes.
Lovely, thank you. That's really helpful and really clear. Sia, is there anything you want to add to that? He's there.
Yeah, hello. No, I'm happy. Unless you've got any question for me, I would be gladly answer them.
I haven't any questions at the moment. I'm sure as we progress further, I'll have more questions. But right now, I'm really appreciative of the work that's gone into planning for this and the efforts that have gone into scheduling it to minimise the disruption. So as Dave, when he introduced this item, said it's a 150-year-old bridge and a critical transport link in York's network. And it was last repaired 20 years ago or more. So the assessment in February 2022 identified the need for urgent maintenance, including metalwork repair, re-waterproofing the structure and resurfacing. And we're now doing that responsible thing and getting the bridge repaired so it can continue to serve York's transport needs in the decades to come. And to not do it would risk expensive emergency works at a time not of our choosing. So it's really important. It's going to be disruptive. It will be an 8-week full closure for vehicles, and we'll obviously pedestrian access will definitely be there, but cycle access will work with the contractors. So in terms of, we've set aside the funding in this year's highway budget to do the repairs, and we're looking at reprofiling some funding in order to do the repainting to maximise those benefits and the longevity of the repair. The works, I'm really appreciative of the officers for looking at how we schedule this, and we're making sure that it does not coincide with the works happening outside the station. So we minimise the disruption to the city when this repair is done. So currently it's scheduled to be done straight after Easter next year to minimise this disruption. And then following Lendal Bridge, we'll then be able to move forward with the sustainable travel corridor in the centre of the city. So there's a lot happening in the city, and it's really difficult to balance all these pieces of work, but this is essential and really important for the city. So I am happy to go ahead with the recommendations at paragraph 13, which are to note that the procurement process for the award of a contract for all of the works is currently underway and to be delivered as laid out in paragraphs 3 to 5, and to delegate authority to the Director of Environmental and Regulatory Services in consultation with the Director of Governance and the Head of Procurement to take the steps necessary to award and conclude the contract for the works and any subsequent modifications and extensions, and to seek executive approval for the reprioritisation of highways and transport funding to deliver the painting of the bridge as well. So happy to approve that, and thanks for all the work that's gone into the report. Okay, so moving on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the resident parking review. Who is introducing this one?
Thank you.
My name is Ellen Vergereau. I'm Head of Highway Management. I'm presenting this report on the resident parking review. The report came as in response to a motion presented to the council in September 2024. The report focuses on the process of introducing resident parking. It doesn't really look at areas or charges. It's very much about streamlining, where possible, a process that can be long and sometimes frustrating. So we've looked at different options, all of this constrained by the fact that this goes through a legal process of a traffic regulation order and needs a two-step consultation. So it will not be a short process, but we can try and make it more efficient where possible. And looking at these various options, we've concluded with the recommended options presented in the report, which is introducing more officer decisions leading up to the statutory consultation process so that things go a little bit faster instead of having to bring things to the exec member every time. Widening the consideration of other uses of the highway when we consult with residents. So it's not just about parking, it's about what could we do with the space that is potentially being freed from cars parked. Removing the guideline that officers have been using with the 50% response rate and then 50% support, and instead looking at how the proposed rest park would fit with transport strategy and local circumstances, and obviously support and objections. We also propose to increase the use of digital tools for consultation, as this enables us to be more efficient when analyzing all the responses. We will, of course, continue with paper-based or email-based for people who need this to make sure that the consultation is accessible.
Lovely. Thank you, Helen. Did anyone else want to add anything? No. Okay. Well, thank you for the work that has gone into this and the thinking around how we can streamline it, because I do appreciate that this is a legal process and there are elements that have to be done and there is a limit to how much it can be streamlined. However, I'm really pleased to see these recommendations come forward, and I'd like to thank Councillor Whitcroft for his motion in the first place, which prompted this review and forced us to look at how the system is working. Because I recognise that we have a backlog of resident parking requests. It's a problem for a lot of residents across the city. And the current system does see communities waiting somewhere between 2 and 4 years for their request to reach implementation sometimes, by which time the parking problem has really magnified. And we recognise that some communities have large numbers of rental properties where engagement with the Res Park consultation can sometimes be low. And under that current system, it made it near impossible for the residents to gain the recommended 50% response rate or the 50% support for officers to then recommend the Res Park. So they got stuck in a loop, despite there being a clear need in those areas for resident parking. And I think the other side of this is that with the transport strategy that we approved last summer, the current system that we have doesn't provide the opportunities to enhance our neighbourhoods and to use that curbside space in the way that benefits the local community in the greatest way. So it's public highway, and therefore it can be used in a multitude of ways, not just for parking cars. And the other things that we could consider, such as cycle parking in places where people don't have space to store cycles inside, bus lanes where we want to prioritise the bus, pavement cafes outside businesses, widening the pavement to make it more accessible for pedestrians, car club bays, blue badge parking, sustainable urban drainage, extra trees. So there are many opportunities, and this new process, although we can't necessarily do all of those things I've just mentioned, it starts to widen out the possibilities of what we can do when we're also looking at Res Park. And that transport strategy that we approved last summer committed us to increase accessibility, to improve walking, wheeling, cycling, improve public transport, safeguard our environment, create healthy spaces and reduce car dependency. And this actually helps with all of those elements of the transport strategy. So we're bringing forward these changes to streamline the ResPark process and to enable neighbourhood improvements to be implemented at the same time where the opportunity exists and where we have the funding to do so. And it's to better align our transport strategy objectives. And I want to be clear that this is not about imposing ResPark on communities that don't want it, or the council making money out of ResPark. This is not what this paper and this decision is about. And just to touch on some of the points that Councillor Fenton mentioned, this review is purely about the process and about streamlining that process and providing opportunity to bring additional benefits for the community in terms of how the highway is used. It doesn't look at that other question that was in the ResPark motion around reviewing how ResPark is implemented in terms of the size of ResPark areas, the pricing of ResPark areas, and it doesn't look at the looking at the whole 2 kilometres from the city centre that we have in the implementation plan, because for that we are at the same time about to start on our parking review, and I very much want to take into account the feedback that we get from the parking review to look at the best way of using the public highway in that area close to the city centre. So there is more work to come and we need to join the dots on this. This paper is very much about the streamlining of ResPark and opportunities within. So it will still involve a full consultation with the local community. It will still enable people to come and speak at the meeting and have their say on any ResPark proposals. But I'm hoping that this will reduce the frustration of the years of waiting for a ResPark decision and help to streamline the process and enable communities to help design their neighbourhoods to make them work in the best possible way for them. So I'm happy to go with the recommendations in the paper. So the following changes, it says, are that ResPark requests, sorry, I'm just reading through, there's a lot of text here. The following changes to the process for the ResPark waiting list and of the decision session to proceed to statutory consultation. Part 1, ResPark requests which are not submitted through a petition will be added to the waiting list by officers. An executive member decision will only be required where ward members and/or officers are opposed to the request being added to the waiting list. And once a proposal reaches the top of the waiting list, the first informal consultation will be undertaken without the need for a public decision. And part 2, once the informal consultation has concluded, the decision to initiate the statutory consultation stage will be made by a senior officer, published officer decision, and this will apply unless ward members and/or officers are opposed to the scheme progressing to statutory consultation. In these cases, the decision will be made by the executive member at a decision session. And B, changes to the informal consultation process so that it can be linked to the implementation of the wider council's transport strategy by consulting residents and businesses on options for alternate uses of curbside space in their area or street if a ResPark scheme is implemented, to provide alternative curbside uses and activities such as car club cars, cycle hangers, providing more space to pedestrians, cyclists or buses, planting trees or retrofitting sustainable urban drainage solutions. And part C, changes to the way officers consider the responses to the informal consultation to inform their recommendations by removing the current officer guidelines where 50% response rate and 50% of responses received in support are usually required for officers to recommend that the proposed scheme progresses to the statutory consultation stage. Officers' recommendations on whether to proceed with a proposed scheme will be based on the applicable legal framework and the council's adopted policies and strategies, and a qualitative review of the feedback and objections received through the consultation process. And I also note that officers will aim to implement and encourage the use of digital tools for engagement and consultation, retaining the option of letters and emails to ensure that the process remains inclusive. So thank you for putting this paper together and for all the thought that's gone into how we streamline the process. Much appreciated, and look forward to seeing that in action. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is item 7, the decision report on the informal consultation of annual review of traffic regulation order requests. Jeff, are you going to introduce this one?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name's Jeff Holmes. I'm the Traffic Projects Officer who's responsible for the wider annual review project. We receive a large number of non-urgent requests for changes to the parking, stopping and waiting order each year. These requests are considered together on an annual basis. This saves officer time and money, and it was agreed with yourself to remove the requirement to present all requests at a decision session and leave the approval to advertise the statutory consultation to the director if ward council has agreed with the proposals. 130 areas were reviewed across the city. The individual ward items were then sent to councillors for an informal consultation and requested comments in support or objection to the proposed items. We received objections from Councillor Waters regarding the proposed restrictions contained within Annexes A to F. The recommended options are Annexes A to D. Annex A of Osbaldwick Link Road. Previously, there were double yellow lines on Osbaldwick Link Road. These were removed a few years ago as they were considered no longer required due to the nature of businesses and the available parking at each site. Following the redevelopment of some businesses off Osbaldwick Link Road and an increase in vehicle access to the sites, the issue of footpath parking started again. The proposed no waiting at any time restrictions, the double yellow lines, will restore the previous restrictions and remove the footpath parking. Councillor Waters' suggestion of installing bollards would restrict the parking, but would leave the remainder of the link road open to further parking. The proposal in Annex B, Merton Way to the village of Merton. We received reports and images of parking on the footpaths and verges in the area close to Outgang Lane, removing access to the footpath. There is a footpath only on one side of the carriageway in that section. The section where the parking was occurring is a national speed limit 60-mile-an-hour road. Proposed clearway to run from the existing restriction to the village of Merton would remove all parking, stopping and waiting 24 hours a day and provide access to the one footpath at all times. The councillor's suggestion that clearway is only required to Holly Tree Farm would remove the parking in that section, but could lead to parking then occurring further along the road, leading to significant safety concerns on a national speed limit road. Annex C, the Merton Way west of the link road, is an extension to the existing previously approved restrictions. During the previous consultation, we received representations from 2 residents adjacent to the proposed restrictions at that time, requesting we extend the restriction, as the proposed restrictions at that time would lead to vehicles parking close to a tactile crossing point. The proposed restrictions in Annex C will provide access to and increase visibility from the tactile crossing points, along with increased visibility when using the Beckett Drive junction. The councillor's request for an urban clearway would remove parking in the peak times requested, but would not remove the issue at any other times of the day or access to the tactile crossing and junction of Beckett Drive. Annex D. Our sustainable transport team have reported bus access issues in the area of the junction of Osbaldwick Village and Osbaldwick Lane, including the straight section and around the bend of Osbaldwick Lane. They report the issues can be at all times of the day due to funerals and weddings at the church and parking opposite the church on Osbaldwick Lane. The proposed restrictions would restrict parking in this location. We do accept that the proposed double yellow lines would not remove the dropping off and collecting of children to the Tiddlywinks nursery. However, the suggested urban clearway around the entirety of Osbaldwick Village and Osbaldwick Lane, including Merton Way and Tranby Avenue, which is the route for the number 6 bus route, would be to the detriment of all residents, blue badge holders and businesses in the village during the suggested restriction times, and would not remove the bus access issue at all other times. With an urban clearway, there is no exemption within the TRO for wedding and funeral vehicles, but they do have an exemption on double yellow lines. And then just Annex E and F, Annex E contains a plan to illustrate where the urban clearway could be installed around the village. At the time of me doing that plan, I wasn't fully aware of where Councillor Waters wanted the urban clearway to start and end. Annex F contains a plan showing extensive double yellow lines from the existing restriction on Merton Way to the junction and including Osbaldwick Link Road. Both Annex E and Annex F are not recommended options. So it's therefore requested that we give approval to advertise the proposed restrictions within Annex A to D.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add anything? Okay. Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate a huge amount of work that's gone into that in terms of taking on board all the feedback from various different organisations and people and trying to balance all the needs. And I recognise how difficult that is sometimes. I do recognise the frustration of Councillor Waters and Osbaldwick Parish Council, and there is a statement from Councillor Waters included alongside this decision. Their frustration around the obstructive parking in the ward, absolutely recognise that. And I do understand why they'd prefer an urban clearway, that it's more discreet than double yellow lines, and they want to preserve that village environment. However, we also need to weigh up legitimate parking on the public highway and the impact of any proposal on blue badge holders and business activity and the church requirements and the school and nursery requirements and the resident needs. We've currently got a number of locations where the bus is regularly obstructed by inconsiderate parking. The proposed urban clearway would only resolve that parking during the 2 periods of the day and leave a risk of obstructive parking along the route at other times. And it would prevent blue badge holders from parking during those proposed hours. And it would also prevent any loading or unloading that might need to occur for the businesses there or for residents who are moving house or whatever reason you might have loading and unloading, having a supermarket delivery. It also would prevent, as you said, any parking associated with weddings, funerals at the church during those hours. By contrast, the proposed double yellows will prevent parking in the areas that currently experience the inconsiderate parking where the bus is struggling to get through. And it will also prevent the pavement and cycleway parking that's happening on the Osbaldwick Link Road. And it will prevent that parking at all times of day. So the intention is that it keeps the footway clear and it enables the bus to have access all the time. And it will also allow legitimate parking for those who need to park near the location for a short amount of time. I'm aware that any solution will push the parking problem further down the road. It always does. And one thing I wanted to check was we've got the traffic regulation order for Tranby Avenue, and would the intention be to try and implement the Tranby Avenue changes at the same time as these changes?
It's not a project that I'm working on, but I do know that there are ongoing considerations and conversations regarding that.
Okay, so I think that's something for us to take away and try and make sure that they're implemented at a similar time so that we don't just push the problem onto Tranby Avenue as much as possible. And, you know, if this problem persists and moves to another area and we end up with the bus not being able to get through somewhere else, then we may need to come back, and this is what happens in the city, we may need to come back and consider other options. Enforcement will be key. My understanding is it is more straightforward to enforce with the double yellow lines than it is. I noticed in the statement from the parish council and from Councillor Waters, they talked about enforcing planning conditions associated with some of the businesses. I think we will have more success in enforcing on parking on double yellow lines. So we should be able to control it better. This is not a decision that is intended to push residents towards wanting Res Park. We're trying to find a reasonable balance for the area to enable legitimate parking activity, but prevent obstructive parking. And the proposed solution with the double yellows in those locations that are most problematic continues to ensure that we have accessible parking available for blue badge holders. We prioritise pedestrians and cyclists by keeping that pavement and cycleway clear, and we prioritise public transport by keeping the bus route clear. And we prioritise our green spaces and our pride in our neighbourhood by stopping parking on verges. And we prioritise road safety by making sure that we don't have parking in dangerous places. So I'm content to move forward with the recommendations that officers have suggested in the report. So this is at 7A, to advertise the recommended proposals to amend the York parking and stopping waiting order as set out in annexes A to D. And in the event that no objections are received to the proposals, that the authority be delegated to the Director of City Development to implement the proposed variations to the order. So I will move forward with that, and I will not look at the other options in the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then on to item 8, the final item on this agenda. The decision report for consideration of representations received during the statutory consultation for the proposed R67 Huntington Road residents priority parking scheme. And Jeff, I think it's you again.
Thank you.
So during the January decision session, it was resolved to advertise the proposed scheme in order to gain a clearer view of residents' opinions on the proposal. Statutory consultation began in May of this year, and residents were asked to provide their representations in support or objection by 13th of June. The proposed scheme was to include Haley's Terrace, a section of Huntington Road, Kitchener Street, Oakville Street, Ashville, Oakville Court and Yearsley Crescent, as illustrated in Annex A. The proposed times of operation were to be 24 hours, Monday to Sunday. We consulted with all 288 properties within the proposed zone. During the consultation, we received 13 representations in objection to the proposal. All representations are contained in Annex B. There is a brief run through in the report. It's worth noting that both in support and objections, we received representations regarding the tensions on Yearsley Crescent, with some residents placing cones on the carriageway. I and we as a team have been out regularly to remove these cones from the highway. And if we were to go ahead with the scheme, would also include within the letter that it's not an acceptable behaviour and there is no guarantee of parking outside a property. We received objections from staff staff of the local businesses, one being a beauty salon on Huntington Road, another being the dental surgery on Haley's Terrace, advising that they need parking for longer than the 2 hours that I propose. We have 1 hour bay, 1 2 hour bay on Haley's Terrace and one on Huntington Road. For that reason was the reason why we proposed them longer than the other bays within the zone. They are allowed to purchase one vehicle specific permit. There is an option within the report to extend it to 3 hours, but based on the representations that we've received, it wouldn't resolve the issues that they've raised. It's worth noting that there is unrestricted parking outside of the zone for customers and patients, that it would be located on Dodsworth Avenue and Foss Way. We also received a number of objections requesting that it was Monday to Friday 9 till 5, and during the informal consultation stage, a majority of the respondents requested 24/7 restriction. A couple of representations did mention the low response rate during the informal consultation, indicating that the scheme was not wanted by residents. The decision to take the proposal forward to statutory consultation was due to 60% of the respondents being in favour of the scheme, and it was not possible to interpret non-engagement as either supporting or objecting to the scheme. During the representations, we received 13 in objection and 18 in support of the 288 properties consulted. We received representations both in support and objection regarding the proposed length of no waiting double yellow lines on Huntington Road. The reason why we've proposed that is the existing bus stop in the location was inaccessible for buses due to parked vehicles at that time in that location. And also to install a bay adjacent to 154 Huntington Road. We're unable to do this. There is enough space at the moment for a vehicle to pull between the two sections of drop curbs. But for us to install a bay, we have to have a metre clearance either side of that bay, which there isn't sufficient space for this. And another objection was the cost of permits, but it's not within the scope of this consultation to consider that, and all fees and charges are agreed at full council and reviewed annually. The representations that we did receive in support, stated that they find it difficult to park and often park on neighbouring streets. Commuter parking is the main cause of reduced spaces being available near to the homes, and that they agree with the proposal to provide better access to the cycle lane. Informal space claiming practices, as I've mentioned, on Yearsley Crescent, and finding tradespeople willing to visit is problematic due to the lack of available spaces on the side streets particularly, and HMOs and holiday lets contributing to an increase in the volume of vehicles. The recommended option is proposed as it will remove commuter parking that's occurring, causing conflicts between residents as the highway is being illegally obstructed by cones to save parking. The introduction of Res Park will remove this behaviour and also remove the obstructive parking from the bus stop and cycle lane, which will help improve walking, wheeling and cycle and reduce car dependency. And the recommended option also provides an availability for short stay on-street parking to access local businesses. It's therefore that we're seeking your approval to approve option A to amend the TRO and implement proposed Res Park scheme.
Thank you. And again, thank you for all the thought that's gone into that and the listening to the feedback that we've had from residents and businesses in the area. I'm grateful that you've put that effort into looking at how we ensure that the bus has a smoother passage along Huntington Road, and that it doesn't encounter inconsiderate parking around the bus stop. And similarly, that we ensure that the cycle lane is kept free and accessible for people. So a number of the objections are from the local businesses, as you said, but I think it's really important to note that we've retained a large number of available on-street parking bays for both 1 hour and 2 hour parking options on Huntington Road and on Haley's Terrace. And for anyone who needs to park for longer than 2 hours, there is freely available parking just to the outside of the Res Park zone on Fossway and on Dodsworth Avenue, around 200 metres walk from the boundary of the Res Park zone. So there is still parking available, but I also want to note that there are really good bus services to the area. And I noticed that some of the businesses said it was impossible for customers to get there because the bus services weren't good enough. Well, we're going to end up in a vicious circle. If we're just filling the road with cars that slow down the buses, then we won't have good bus services. So we have to make sure that we get that balance right. We enable our buses to flow freely along those major transport corridors, and that there are good bus services serving the area. And as one of our public speakers today said, there are a number of buses serving this area. We've got the number 13 on Huntington Road approximately every 45 minutes. We've got the number 5 and 5A on Haxby Road that then joins Huntington Road at the top of the Res Park zone approximately every 30 minutes. And the number 12 coming along Dodsworth Avenue and then Huntington Road, again, around every 30 minutes. So there are good bus options in the area, as well as being able to drive there. When we're looking at how we use the public highway, as we've said in the previous report, there are many ways in which the highway can be used, and we need to assess how best to use the space to serve the needs of the local community and bring widest public benefit. And on Huntington Road, I'm really pleased that, and on Haley's Terrace, we're prioritising that bus access and the cycle lane, but we're still enabling a good level of parking to support local businesses as well. So I think this is a good balance. And on the residential streets, I think the community has made it clear that they want us to prioritise resident parking, and that's what this proposal does. And hopefully it will make it much easier for residents to be able to park, not necessarily right outside their homes, but not a million miles away and not searching for spaces for absolutely ages. And in the future, we'll be very open to applications for other uses of street space once we get some of our other schemes up and running, such as the cycle storage when we get our cycle hanger scheme up and running. So I'm very pleased to move forward with the recommendation in the report, which is option A, to approve the variation of York parking, stopping and waiting order to implement the proposed R67 Huntington Road Residents Priority Parking Scheme as advertised. Thank you for all the work that's gone into that. Thank you. So that is the last item, and I am not aware of any urgent business. So thank you everyone for coming along today. Thanks for input from public speakers and for all the work that's gone into the reports. Thanks everybody, and close the meeting.